Hello folks, it's Mr. Neil. In this session we're going to continue looking at software development and continue to use Turtle. And in this session we're going to look and focus in on user input. So by the end of this session you will be able to write Python code for inputting numbers. You'll know a little bit about variables and we'll use some simplistic mathematics, mainly focusing on division in Python. Looking back to last session, you used loops to create some mandalas that look like the ones that I have on the screen here. You may have even added the functionality to add some colour to your mandalas. Here's the code that you wrote last week to create your mandalas. And you'll see whilst the code in front of you looks exactly the same, when you look at the values that we're using, they are actually creating different mandalas. And all we had to do to get a different mandala was change the numbers. But wouldn't it be great if the code was always the same and the program was able to change depending on what the user wanted? And that's what we're going to look at in this video. Every computer program that you write follows these three processes: input, process, output. We input information into the program as a user. The program then processes that information and then the information is outputted back to the screen. Last week when we were creating our mandalas, we were focusing in on process because it was following our code, creating something and then outputting that mandala to the screen. This week we are going to focus on the start of this cycle and we're going to focus in on input. And that is where our program collects data from the user and creates a mandala based on the information that the user gives it. And in order to get input from the user, we need to know about a couple of different things. So we need to have a wee think about, how do I create the mandala? What information do I need to know about the mandala in order to create it? Pause the video now and on a sheet of paper write down the three things we need to know to create a mandala. Okay, let's now have a look at the three things we need to create a mandala. The first thing is we need to know the number of shapes. So this image that I have here is made up of pentagons, but how many pentagons is it made up of? So we need to know the number of shapes that are going to be in our mandala. We need to know the number of sides each shape will have. So this one here is made up of pentagons, so our shape has got 5 sides. And lastly, we need to know the length of each side. How long is each side of our shape? So try and remember those three things and we'll come back to them. We're going to head into REPL in a second and we're going to code this. But before we do, we're going to talk about mathematical operators. Now these are very similar to the mathematical operators that you use in maths. Addition and subtraction are identical, but divide and multiplication are different. And that is because if you look on the keyboard, there is no division sign as we see it, so we use a backslash. And so that we don't get confused between an X and an asterisk, we use the asterisk for multiplication. And today we are going to use the division quite a bit. The information that we're going to collect from the user is going to be stored in something called a variable. A variable is a placeholder for information, a place where we will hold information and we will use that information later on. We can call this variable whatever we want, but it's important that it has a name that means something to us. So for example, if I'm entering 29 into a variable called age, it's very clear that the value 29 is someone or something's age. So let's now head over to REPL and see how we're going to build this program. Here we are in REPL, and you can choose to code along with me. So I code a line, you pause and you go do it, or you can choose to pause the video at the end and do it all together. So here we have my code from last week, and this is my pentagon mandala. And if I just click run, you will get to see the mandala load up here. So we're going to use this code to create a program where the user gets to decide what the mandala will look like. So the first thing you need to go is go and find an example of a mandala that you created last week. Doesn't matter which one it is. So I've got my mandala here and I'm going to edit this code, but I don't want to lose this code. So I'm going to click on the file name at the top and there'll be an option for fork, and this will copy my mandala. And we're going to change the name of the file by clicking on the file name, and then we can type in the box and we're going to call it mandala user input. So the first thing that we are going to ask for is we are going to ask for the number of shapes that are going to be in our mandala. So I'm just going to go to some line 3, it can be line 5, doesn't matter. I'm going to go and type in num shape and press equals. And I'm then going to type int input. And you'll notice there that as soon as I type an opening bracket, REPL already goes, well, you're going to need a closing bracket. So it's really important that if we open a bracket, we close the bracket. And inside the brackets, I'm going to put a quotation mark. And again, REPL will put a second one. And I'm going to type in enter number of shapes. And if we click run, before I get anything drawn, down in the console area, I'm asked to enter the number of shapes. So for example, I could enter 20 and hit enter. And at that point, it draws my mandala. But you'll notice here that there are not 20 shapes, there are only 10. So we need to change some more code so that it draws the right number of shapes. This number here, number 10, is the number of shapes that are going to be in my mandala. So I'm going to change that to the variable num shape. And then I'm going to click run. I'm going to enter the number of shapes. And again, I'm going to put 20, hit enter, and it will draw 20 pentagons. However, you will notice that after it has drawn 10 pentagons, it will start drawing over the top of itself. And that's because we need to change the angle that we rotate between shape. So we're going to, on line 4, we are going to create a variable called rotate shape. And rotate shape is the angle I want to rotate between each of my shapes. And our turtle is going in a full 360-degree circle as it draws all these shapes. So we want 360 divided by num shape. And on line 15, I'm going to change the 36 to be rotate shape. And this is the angle that we move between each shape. And I'm now going to hit run. We're going to enter the number of shapes 20. And you'll notice that between each shape, we rotate the right number of degrees until we get all the way round after we have drawn the 20 shapes. So this means that our user is now able to customize the number of shapes that are in the mandala. Let's now look at customizing the actual shape that the program creates. So like before, I'm going to enter a new line and I'm going to type in a variable called number of sides. And we're going to go equals int input. And this time inside my quotation marks, I'm going to type enter number of sides. And we'll change the code on line 12 to, instead of rotating round 5 times, to rotate round number of sides time. So if I now run it, I want 5 shapes, each with 4 sides, and hit run. We will get something that looks a little weird. And the reason it looks a little weird is because although we're drawing 4 sides, we're not rotating the right angle between each side. So we need to figure out the angle that we are going to rotate between each side. Now, some of you might have worked this out yourself, and if you can, why not pause and implement it and see if it's right. To calculate the angle that we need to rotate between each side, we're going to create a new variable called rotate side. and we're going to say we want to take 360 degrees and divide it by the number of sides on our shape. And then on line 16, we're going to replace the 72 with rotate side. And then we're going to hit run. So if we say the number of shapes is 5, the number of sides on each shape is 4, and we hit enter, when I run it, I will now get 5 squares in my mandala. The last thing we want the user to be able to do is customize the length of each side. So we're going to create one new variable, and we are going to call this new variable side len, and we're going to go input, enter length of side, and we're going to change the distance on line 17 to be side len, and then we are going to hit run. And now we're asked for the number of shapes. Let's go for 6. This number of sides, let's also go for 6. And the length of each side, let's go for 50. Hit enter, and our turtle will start to draw, and the turtle will now draw 6 hexagons with the length of 50. So there you have it. That is how you convert your mandala program to work with user input. What I would like you to do now is I would like you to pause the video and create your own version of the mandala user input program. If you can't find any of your mandala programs from last week, you can use the link on screen to help you. Once you have got your program coded, it's really important that you test that it works. So on the screen now, you have some of the mandalas that you would have created last week. So run these numbers through your program. So for example, the number of shapes 9, the number of sides 3, and the length of the side 150 should give you this triangle mandala here. Number of shapes 6, number of sides 360, length of each side 1 should give you this circle mandala here. Some of you last week added colour to your mandala. If your mandala this week doesn't have colour, why don't you have a go at adding it? If you didn't add colour to your mandala last week, it's fairly straightforward. Here's how. Firstly, you need to include the line import random. You're then going to create a variable called palette, and in palette you're going to specify the different colours that you would want your mandala to be. And most colours it has access to. We're then going to add a line after our for counter in range 10 line that says colour, brackets, random.choice, palette. And this will randomly pick a colour within our palette to draw the line off, and you'll get something like that. So in this lesson, you've successfully added user input to your mandala, and you've used variables to store that user input and use it at a later stage within your program.